And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, the Indiana Hoosiers take care of business at home against the Minnesota Golden Gophers, 90-71. All you really need to know about this game is that Indiana hit 18 three-pointers, and the game was punctuated by Troy Williams hitting his second of two attempts to close it out and get Indiana to 90. Just a scintillating offensive performance by the Hoosiers, scoring 1.37 points per possession. It felt a lot like the Maryland game, and just a big win for Indiana. Gets the Hoosiers to 8-5 in the conference, a win they needed over a team that's been playing well, and we are going to break it all down for you tonight on this episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jerod Morris. I will be joined by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips on tonight's episode. If you have questions for the show, tweet them to us with the hashtag AssemblyCall. We will get to them. And make sure that you are on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe. You want to make sure that you are getting our post-game emails. Tomorrow's certainly will be a fun one. We start the show off the same way every time. I actually had a couple people email me and asked me this week, what is the banner moment? And I guess we haven't really explained that very much over the last couple seasons, kind of taking it for granted. But the banner moment is basically the moment in every game that leads us to believe that we are on the right track to hang a sixth banner in Assembly Hall. And really, we try and do it so that we start every show out with a positive. Some nights that's easier than others. Tonight, it's really hard just to try and pick one because there are so many great individual performances, great moments, great plays that we could choose from. For me, there are really two, and they're tied, and I'll get to them quickly before we go around the horn here and get Andy and Ryan's open thoughts. Number one was the 6-0 run to start the second half. Indiana led at halftime, 44-38, but it was a first half that was, pretty closely contested. Indiana kind of gained control there at the end of the first half, but they just stormed out to control in the second half, which was great to see because Indiana has been a team this season that has not played the same way offensively at the start of second halves that Tom Crean wants them to. They haven't made the extra pass. They haven't played through the paint, and tonight they did and knocked down 2 threes right off the bat thanks to doing exactly that. So I thought that was a big sign. And the other one for me is, the game ended 90-77, but at the under 4-minute timeout, it was 77-76. And an 18-point lead had kind of dwindled down a little bit. And I don't know about you, but every time that happens, the ghosts of Penn State start to creep in a little bit. The team's pressing, we're turning the ball over a little bit. And we know that Indiana's offense has a tendency to stagnate when they get up, 10, 12 points with 4 or 5 minutes to go. Well, coming out of that timeout, Indiana had a terrific possession where they took 20 to 25 seconds off the clock. It culminated with Troy Williams getting the ball in the paint, kicking it out to Robert Johnson for a three. That put Indiana up 14, and they never looked back. Troy Williams, I think, had a dunk on the next possession, ends up hitting another three. So Troy Williams really took over there the final 4 minutes of the game. But those two moments to me are why this Indiana team is different. Coming out at the start of the second half and playing better like they did, and then making those plays late that teams of the past, especially last year, haven't made. Add it all up, and it comes out to a 90-71 victory. What a night for the Hoosiers. Okay, that's what I saw. Let's go around the horn, get your guys' opening thoughts. Ryan, we will start with you and get your rant. I don't know what you have to rant about, but feel free to just talk about anything that you like.
Yeah, I'll just point out what I thought was the key stretch in the game, like you saw. I think that for me, it was in the first half. Indiana was down 17-10 around the 12:30 mark, and Nick Zeisloft was in there and came in, hit 2 threes within a few minutes. Cut the lead to 17-16. Then he helped out with some really good defense in the post. I mean, that's not something we say about Nick Zeisloft very often, is that he played good defense. But I thought at that point in the game, they needed sort of a steadying presence, and he hit 2 threes. Then Yogi hit one to give us the lead, 19-17. Robert Johnson hit another one. Zeisloft missed a 3, but then he wound up getting some free throws later on, made both of them. I just thought his effort and intensity were really good when he did come in, and he hadn't really been a factor very much lately. So I thought it was just a really nice stretch for him, and to come off the bench when we were kind of lagging behind. I mean, they were getting whatever they wanted early on. They're forcing turnovers and things like that. But I thought he had a really nice game off the bench. I also thought some of the other guys that contributed really well off the bench were Stanford Robinson gave some really nice minutes. I mean, he was defending the post at times. He was deflecting shots and passes, and Emmett Holt also had some really nice minutes. So last week, it may not show up in the box score. We only had something like 15 points out of the bench tonight, and that may not seem like a lot, but I thought they made a lot of really well-rounded contributions. And maybe against Maryland in the loss a couple days ago, we didn't really see that, but I thought that the bench was deeper tonight with 6 guys playing, and I thought that they handed in some really nice contributions, especially at points to help stem the tide when Minnesota looked like it was getting it going.
Well, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet of positivity tonight. So, Andy, get your first helping.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up the bench as well, but the other thing that sticks out to me when we start to look at stats is 23 assists on 32 made baskets, and I think ball movement was so key for all those threes. I mean, so many of them were off of making the extra pass and guys getting into the lane, and they had some issues with turnovers early on. Ended up with I think 18 or 19 for the game, but 23 assists, I feel confident in saying, is a season high. Yogi led the way with 11, and actually of all the great shooting tonight, the guy who'd been the hottest coming into the game, he wound up just 1 of 6, and kind of scrolling down the list was the only guy who took a 3 who didn't hit at least 50% of the ones that he took. So a game tonight where he played more of the facilitator role, but 11 assists for him. Really, really strong performance there. Robert Johnson had 4, and then a handful of other guys pitched in as well. But it was really important in beating the press and some of the passes and trying to make smart passes. And I think to a certain extent with a team that presses a lot, you're going to have some turnovers. But, I thought by and large the guys made the right decisions in places, took an extra dribble when they could and found open guys and did that pretty consistently throughout the, kind of saved those first 5 minutes of the game. I thought really from the middle maybe 30 minutes or so of the game or around that part, Jerod, where you kind of mentioned that they started to pull the ball out a little bit, got a bit away from what they were doing. So maybe the middle 25 minutes of the game, I thought they really had great ball movement. And, the threes they were getting were largely uncontested. And at a certain point, it all kind of snowballs and things go from there. But that was the other thing besides the early lift from the bench that stuck out to me was just the overall ball movement and the assists that they racked up on the evening.
There are so many individual performances to get to, and clearly we have to highlight James Blackman Jr. and Robert Johnson, the 2 freshmen who were atop the scoring column for Indiana tonight. We're going to get to them next, but I want to highlight real quick a stat that is just outstanding. Coming into this game, Minnesota, one of the best teams in the country at forcing turnovers, and I thought, Indiana's been pretty good actually at not turning the ball over this year. They're 40-something in with turnover rate, but Minnesota actually forced Indiana into turnovers on 27.4% of their possessions, which is actually better than Minnesota's season average. And I thought coming in that if Minnesota did that, Indiana was going to have a real hard time winning the game, let alone winning it by 19 points. So what was it that Indiana did that allowed them to overcome the turnovers? Well, look at the rebounding. Indiana rebounds 83.3% of Minnesota's misses, and the Hoosiers rebound 47.6% of their own misses. And so, I want to spend a minute here just talking about the rebounding of this team, because rewind just 2 months ago, think back to that Pittsburgh game when they dominated us on the glass even though we won, and we thought, well, rebounding is just going to be this big problem all year. We're not going to be able to do it. And I tell you what, I am so proud of how this team has improved on the glass, and when you watch them attack rebounds, it just goes to show you that rebounding is about positioning, it's about effort, and it's about just focusing on that as a priority. And you can rebound. It's not all about size because Minnesota's bigger than us. But to do what we did, out-rebound them 35-16, that helped compensate for the turnovers. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons why this team is in the position that they're in, because despite the size differential, they've just taken a want-to attitude on the glass, and obviously it pays huge dividends in a game like tonight. Ryan, your thoughts real quick on this team on the glass.
Yeah, I mean, rebounding is definitely all about positioning, and effort, as you said, and I've been preaching that for 2 years now because the rebounding wasn't an issue last year, and it was earlier in this year. And it's just one of those things where it's about getting where you're supposed to be, focusing on that, getting your man out of the way, and then going up and getting the ball. And on long rebounds, hustling after them. I mean, long rebounds are all about hustle, and I thought tonight was just unbelievable the way they rebounded. It really was, given the size disparity, given that Minnesota was also taking a lot of long shots. Indiana was tracking down rebounds, batting them to each other, just whatever they could to make sure Minnesota didn't get it and get a good second opportunity. In Minnesota only had 5 offensive rebounds, and you can get 5 offensive rebounds just by pure luck. I mean, so when you look at it, they just did such a fantastic job going after the ball. And on the offensive end, too, you had 10 offensive rebounds, and it wasn't like one guy just dominated. Troy had 3, but then you're looking at, Yogi had 1, Robert Johnson had 1, Emmett Holt had 1, Hunter Perea, Stanford Robinson, Nick Zysov. Those guys, that means your entire team is contributing. It's not just one guy chasing down every loose ball. So it was just really fantastic. They minimized the amount that their mistakes would hurt them by picking it up rebounding, and I thought that was absolutely one of the main keys to the game, especially because you saw with the rebounds they would get them and not force up, especially offensively. They wouldn't just force something up. They would kick it back out and move the ball around and make Minnesota work even harder on defense, and that pays dividends in the long run.
Yeah, Indiana on the season is a good offensive rebounding team now, 35.4% of their misses. They're decent on the glass. Andy, Minnesota isn't a great rebounding team, so I suppose it's not a shock. But, I mean, it's still pretty impressive for Indiana to put up these numbers against a team that started 3 guys that much taller than we have.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of looking to see where they were coming into the game. They were last in the Big Ten in defensive rebound percentage. I think we saw why, which is fairly strange for a team with, like, Walker is a pretty good rebounder individually. Eliason feels like he should be, and some of their other guys tend to play on the perimeter a little bit more. So even though Joey King 6'9", he's not necessarily a guy that's going to mix it up inside. But yeah, I mean, you would definitely expect a team with that much size to be able to do that. And I think to your point, I remember going to the UNC Greensboro game and really being struck by the fact that there was no technique from IU and from a rebounding position and just kind of basic fundamentals almost in terms of how to box people out, positioning, effort, the things that you talked about, and to see a difference there. And some of it is athleticism of guys like Troy being able to, kind of jump over people and do that, or be able to jump and get enough of the, bat the ball out to somebody else. But there's certainly a lot of hustle involved, and definitely a huge area that this team has improved. And it's one area where, while we can kind of take the pessimistic approach and think the defense isn't going to get much better, which it probably isn't, rebounding, at least defensively, is a part of that effort. And if that's one area where they can continue to play well, at the very least, that maybe is one area where they can shore things up a little bit on the defensive end in terms of limiting second chances.
Yeah, and Ryan,
I wanted to step in real quick. I don't care who you play. I mean, Minnesota. You said Minnesota's not a great rebounding team, and that's very true. But anytime you have a 35-16 advantage, that's impressive. I don't care who you're playing. You could be playing a local JV high school team. That's a huge difference, and that they should definitely be credited for that. That was a fantastic job.
Well, and as we learned this week, Ryan, you are now the official spokesperson of the Tom Crean fan club, as we found out on Facebook.
Yeah, thanks, Indiana basketball Facebook page.
They're just saying what we've all already known for a long time. Okay, but in all seriousness, doesn't Tom Crean deserve a lot of credit for just the shift? I mean, you don't typically see a change that much in a team, especially in rebounding, when size has actually gotten worse throughout the season. I mean, it's pretty impressive what they've done and just the improvement in technique, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's clearly something this group has had drilled into their heads that, look, you're not good enough or big enough to be lazy as far as rebounding goes. If you don't rebound, you're going to lose, and it has been a really big shift, and it has been impressive. I think several things about this team have been impressive. The difference from last year in things like ball movement and the flow of the offense and things like that were the problem with the team last year is completely different. That goes to coaching. It also goes to just these guys buying in, and so it's on the players as well. You can't just give the credit to the coaches. The players have clearly seen the plan and bought into it and enjoy playing this way. And that shows with nights like tonight or the first Maryland game. I mean, you just see they're having fun with how they play this wide open, spread it out offense and getting, they have the attitude that if they make the extra pass, it's eventually going to come around and be back to them. It's not about them just trying to take it on themselves. They're really buying into the team concepts. And we've heard so much about Tom Crean studying teams like Villanova's guard-heavy lineups and studying European teams and things like that. Well, this team has bought into that and is clearly playing that way. And you're not going to win every game like that when you just score a ton. You're not. You have to play some defense, and you're going to have some nights where you're off shooting and it comes back to bite you. But in a lot of games this year, this team has played this way and played pretty darn well and is kind of perfecting the system.
A couple of interesting notes here. Alex Bozich tweets out that Yogi Ferrell now has 41 assists over Indiana's last 8 games, had a career high 11 tonight. So we got career highs, program highs happening. Kind of interesting that Indiana sets the school record for 18 threes, and Ryan, as you mentioned in our chat, the guy who's been the hottest, Yogi Ferrell, only goes 1 of 6. So fortunately he hit that 1 to keep the 3-point streak alive. But the guy who was on fire tonight was James Blackman Jr., which was so good to see. After really struggling in Indiana's last game against Maryland. And really, he struggled a lot on the road this year and played a lot better at home. But regardless, home away, it's still nice to see James get back to shooting well and get back to just looking like himself on offense because, hey, maybe he plays better at home, but 3 of Indiana's next 5 games are at home, and this one was at home. So, and these are all very important games. James tonight finishes with a team-high 24 points, a game-high 24 points. He had 1 more than Andre Hollins. 6 of 10 from downtown. He was 9 of 14 from the field, and, of course, added 7 rebounds, which we've become accustomed to, and a couple of assists, too. Andy, your thoughts overall on James Blackman Jr.? I thought he was really assertive, and, again, we see that even when his first couple of shots don't go down, he keeps his confidence, and tonight that paid off because they sure started falling after that.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen this from him a couple other times this season when he got into a little bit of a slump, and then as soon as he makes a couple shots, then he's just rolling downhill with everything. And I thought early, he hesitated a little bit. I thought on one of the ones he took early in the game, but I also thought he did a good job picking his spots. He got a couple shots going toward the rim. I think he ended up with 3 of 4 on 2-pointers. And hit 6 threes, and I thought, he missed 5 shots on the game. I want to say he missed his first couple. So really, once he got rolling, picked it up well, and he was a guy. He ended up with no turnovers. Now you didn't have him handle the ball as much against the press. I think they used him a lot in cases where once they were able to break the press, that he was a guy who would move around, spot up on the wing, and obviously did a good job of knocking the shots down there. So when you look at some of the turnover numbers. He had a 0 in that column, and really 15 of the 18 came from Troy, Yogi, and Robert Johnson. So, but I thought they used him occasionally to kind of help break it, but in general, relied on him to make shots at the other end. And I thought, you just see confidence is big for any shooter, but it seems especially important for him once he gets in some of these slumps like he had in that game. He can get out of it pretty quickly, and is a guy that builds that confidence level in a hurry, and saw a couple even in the first half where I think there was one he actually made, but he shot the ball and he took off toward the basket right away, like he didn't think it was going in. And it felt like after that, when he didn't follow his shot quite as quickly at least. And but I thought he did a pretty good job there of really getting in a good rhythm and took good shots. I don't think the other thing in some of these other games when he's missed a lot of shots, you could point to ones that felt, I don't know, selfish, whatever you want to say, where he just forced shots, and I didn't think really any of the ones tonight were forced. So a lot of shots, again, coming in the flow of the offense with all those assists. He was the recipient of quite a few of those.
Yeah, I thought JBJ was good tonight. I think that one of the things that we've seen is early in games, if he's not on, it sort of he misses 1 or 2. It sort of carries with him throughout the game. He's a little more hesitant, and tonight he was not. He missed his first 2 by a pretty wide margin, and then really settled in. And he had a couple where he didn't have time to think. He just kind of caught it and put it up, and that really helped him get in his rhythm because when he wasn't thinking, he put them in. And then after that, after he got 2 or 3 to go, it was lights out the rest of the game from various places. It wasn't just 3. He had 3 twos tonight as well, and was mostly, as Andy said, in the flow of the offense, and I thought he got beaten really badly on defense, maybe in the first couple possessions once or twice, and then after that, I thought he was pretty solid on that end too. So maybe that ankle is starting to feel better, and we're seeing him sort of get back to his self and being more disciplined on defense.
For those of you wondering, we are going to talk about Troy Williams because he was spectacular tonight. But before we do that, I want to talk about Indiana's other freshman real quick, Ryan. I'll go to you on Robert Johnson, who I thought really, flashed kind of all of his qualities tonight. We saw the shooting, we saw the scoring, 19 points. He had 4 assists, he had 3 boards, he had 2 steals. He did a little bit of everything, and he also had those 6 turnovers, a few of which were unforced. And unfortunately, we're kind of growing accustomed to that from him. But they're a little bit easier to take when he's 5 for 8 from downtown and hitting shots like he was. Still, plenty more good than bad from Robert Johnson tonight. But as we'll talk about with Troy here in a second, we really saw the full arsenal, good and bad, from Robert tonight.
Yeah, I think that with Robert, you're always, during his freshman year, you're always going to kind of get the bad sometimes. I mean, the 6 turnovers, many of those were inexcusable, just, losing concentration or trying something silly like a drive where he obviously shouldn't have been driving. But again, like you said, at times you see the guy as an absolute assassin. He was 5 of 8 from 3, 6 of 10 from the field. He even had a drive late in the game where nothing really was going on. He drove in, he missed the shot, but because he made the effort to get the shot up, Troy Williams was right there for an offensive rebound dunk. So you kind of take the good with the bad right now. He's still, 18, 19 years old. He's a young kid, and he's still getting used to his role. I mean, he's played heavy minutes this year as a freshman, and really considering all of that, he hasn't really had horrible stretches. He's had some stretches where he hasn't played very well, but nothing where you think, okay, we need to get him out of the starting lineup and put somebody else in there. So we all know he's going to be great, and tonight he showed flashes of if he can do what he did tonight consistently, he's going to be an all Big Ten player, and I don't think that anybody questions that.
And speaking of all Big Ten players, Troy Williams. And we talk a lot about how this team needs all Big Ten Troy to step up for this team to win games, and he sure did tonight. Troy finishes with 19 points. He has 9 boards, a couple of assists, a steal, a block. He did have 5 turnovers, and again, you're going to get some of those playing against Minnesota. Fortunately, Indiana was able to minimize the negative impact, but I thought overall, Troy was incredible. And Andy, we saw from Troy last year, people may forget, he started to make jump shots at the end of last year. If you remember, that was kind of one of the big positives that we took from, kind of a moribund end to the season was, hey, at least Troy's starting to make some threes. And tonight, he had a jumper from the wing, he had a couple threes. The shot looked good. Now, I suppose that could be fool's gold if there's not real improvement underlying it and he gets a little overconfident shooting. But, we've talked all along that Troy just becomes a lethal All-American type force if he gets a jump shot. Played like an All-American tonight. Is that something that you think that we'll see consistently from him now?
I don't know. I mean, I would like to think that he's still going to, shy away from that a little bit. But the difference I saw with him tonight was he just took him with a lot more confidence. There have been most of the other jumpers I can remember him taking, at least in Big Ten play. And I think we talked about this a little bit the last game, or maybe the one prior, where we talked about other teams are starting to put their bigger front court player on him and basically having him stand in the lane and dare Troy to take jumpers. And in the times when he's actually taken the opponent up on that offer, he hasn't done it with a great deal of confidence, where it kind of like he feels like, well, I'm going to try one, and if it works, then great, and if not, then go back to doing what I'm doing. And I thought he took the first one confidently, and I think kind of built from there. And at a certain point, everybody was making threes. I joked that at one time that I thought Troy was going to kick it out to Stan, and that if he made a 3 at that point, then I was just going to turn the game off, because that was pretty much the end of it right there. But ended up getting a foul called, so it didn't actually happen. But I thought confidence was a big thing, and that it's something that he works on, because the coaching staff and him, like everybody else, knows that's really the part of his game that's going to allow him to get to the next level. So I don't want to. I guess we'll find out in the next game whether it was an anomaly or not, because you have to think that heading into the Purdue game, they're going to try to defend him similar to what they did in the first game. put a guy like Hammonds on him and have him wait back in the lane and see what happens. So particularly in a matchup like that, where so many shots were blocked last time, if Troy can hit a couple of those, even in the kind of 15-foot range, a free throw type jumper, I think would be key. Do you want him shooting 20-footers on a lot of occasions? No, but I think it's a good thing, and it at least gives opponents something to think about as they start to consider laying off of him and going from there. So, and then there was also that time during this game when he nearly killed a guy trying to jump from about 10 feet out. So that shouldn't go without mention as well. That there was definitely a point, I think Crimson Corey said, where you could tell Troy was just kind of like, well, F it, I'm just going to take it and go right at this guy. And it was that moment when he just accelerated, and you're like, oh my lord, what is going to happen to this guy? So that was exciting as well. So nice to see Troy with some other moments besides the normal dunks we're seeing by hitting those jumpers, and the one off the nice behind the back look from Yogi was pretty. So hopefully, obviously IU fans are hoping that's something we can see from him on a regular basis, but I'll be content to continue seeing him dunk on everybody. And as I said, the offense going forward is only shoot threes, and the only allowable 2-point shots are Troy dunks, or attempted homicides, as was the case tonight.
Yeah, when he tried to combine the Pritch slap and the Sheehy slam into one life-altering, rim-killing dunk that unfortunately missed. Hey, does any program have better missed dunks than us? Between Victor's against Michigan and Troy's? Good Lord. By the way, quick prediction, and my predictions almost always turn out correct, except when made before the Wisconsin game. Troy Williams someday is going to finish what Victor Oladipo started last night. I'm just going to throw that out there. Down?
I think that first of all, congratulations to Victor. I thought that it was a lot of fun last night. If that second dunk goes down cleanly, it's a 50, so he would have left the first round with 100%, with 100 points, which would have been amazing. Zach LaVine is a freak. He's not human, so it's really hard for anybody to beat him. But I would love to see Victor do it again, be in another one, and someday to see maybe Troy in one with him. But as far as Troy tonight, somebody has to go back and count up how many dunks he has this year versus field goals. I really want to see it. He had a couple really nice jumpers tonight. I thought his form was much better than it's been. It was very settled. His body didn't over-rotate, from his shooting side. It was a balanced shot. His shoulders were square to the basket. And I thought both of his threes were very nice and actually, had excellent form. I don't expect that every time from Troy. It's a process. It's going to take a while. Because he hit 2 of 2 tonight does not mean that he's going to be great from now on from 3. I think that's something he's going to have to work on in the offseason, but it's nice to know that tool is in the bag, so to speak. Also, the behind-the-back pass from Yogi to the 3 from Troy, if he had missed that, he never would have heard the end of it, ever. So, that was he had to make that, or he wasn't going to be able to live as part of this team ever again.
And how great was that with the journey being right after the game, and they keep promoting Yogi talking about, hey, if I just throw it to him, he's going to make it.
Yeah.
Usually for dunks, not for a 3.
Yeah. So Troy with 19, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, a block. His block early on was phenomenal as well. It was a weak side block. He was coming off of somebody else to help and just absolutely sent it into the third row, which was fantastic. But, again, you're going to get the bad with Troy. 5 turnovers, there's no excuse for that, but at least his turnovers, when he makes them, they may be dumb, but they come from aggressiveness and from trying to make something happen. So you kind of live with that because his game is going to be out of control at times because he goes so hard. So it's a matter of him, as with Victor, learning when to tone that down and when to go. And it's a delicate balance. It's going to take a while. But, again, all Big Ten Troy showed up tonight and was phenomenal. And those dunks, they're just 2 points like a layup, but they electrify the crowd, they electrify his teammates, and they can be momentum changers. And I'm sorry, I think Richard Pitino, had he made that dunk from basically the free throw line when he jumped and missed, I think Richard Pitino would have thrown in the towel and just taken his team off the court and gone home. It was at that point, that would have been unbelievable.
So I want to ask you guys something. Andy, let me go to you with this. It's a trend that I've been noticing, which is that our defense always seems to be, it's not good, but it's at least decent through the first 20 minutes. It seems like almost every game we hold the opponent to less than their point per possession average in the first half. Now tonight we didn't do that, but 2 possessions into the second half, Minnesota was below their season average for points per possession. But in almost every game, our opponent ends up higher than their season average for points per possession. And Andy, I'm just curious if you see a reason for that. I mean, in a game like tonight, obviously, things kind of started to scramble there at the end, and it wasn't quite the same as it's been in some other games. But is it fatigue? Is it something strategic that we're doing? Because I tend to find myself encouraged early in games. Hey, we're playing a little bit better defense, but the numbers are always still pretty piss poor at the end of the night. And even tonight, you give up 1.11 points per possession to Minnesota. That's not good. It's just you don't even think about it when you score 1.37. So your margin is ridiculous. But is there any reason why you're seeing the defense not be as good later in games as it is earlier?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think tonight fatigue was probably a little bit of a factor. I mean, with the press, takes a little bit more out of you. It was pretty up and down, and really once again in the second half. I mean, IU subbed some, but I don't feel like the bench played a ton in stretches, at least not until the latter part. And I think the other part is probably adjustments at halftime. I mean, teams start to figure things out about or at least be more forceful about where they want to try to get the ball against IU and are just more successful. I don't know that there's anything to read into it because I don't know that I ever feel like the defense is – I don't know that I'm ever in your camp where I'm like, oh, this seems better tonight. So I don't really know that I've ever been there to think what might be different. I just –
You're a pessimist, Bottoms.
Well, for the defense of this team, I would say that's absolutely true. So I don't know. I haven't really noticed too much in that regard with the way this team's played. I think some of it might just be luck to a certain extent, made shots, missed shots, but I think fatigue is potentially a factor, especially as IU's been playing the main rotation guys a ton of minutes lately, it feels like, and I do think there's something to be said for that, where trying to maintain whatever level of intensity you can over that period of time is difficult, and that's a potential factor. But outside of that, I don't know that I have a good answer for you on that one.
I got a couple quick interesting notes here from the post-game press conference that are trickling in. We talked about worrying if maybe Troy is going to start getting some irrational confidence in his shot. Let's put that to bed right now. So Justin Albers tweets, players asked if school record ever crossed their minds. Blackman and Johnson look at Williams. Y'all the shooters, he said. So he's not lumping himself in the shooter category. And then Troy Williams asked to pick his favorite dunk. His response, I just dunk. Someone get T-shirts made. I just dunk with a silhouette of Troy Williams. They'll sell like hotcakes. I would wear those. Ryan, I want to go to you with something because I don't want this to be overlooked. This is not a game that, from a statistical perspective, is going to go in the Colin Hartman career scrapbook. He had 6 points, no assists, no rebounds, no steals, no blocks, 3 fouls. Frankly, didn't do a whole lot. Only played 14 minutes. But all I know is this. I have in my notes, I have this written right here. Twice now, Harton has prevented me from tweeting about Penn State. So all through the end of that game, I was from between about the 11-minute mark to really about the under 4-minute timeout when Indiana took it over, I was worried about Minnesota's press, forcing steals, getting us crazy, the ghost of Penn State trickling in. And Colin Hartman made 2 threes late that coming after Minnesota buckets that really stopped them from ever getting any momentum. And so I know that it wasn't, a game of hashtag Colin Hartman things, but those 2 shots he made were really big. And I just want to make sure that we mention him because he continues to be a guy who, even when his contributions are a little bit less, as they've been in this game, and, we've seen his efficiency taper off a little bit as the season has gone along. But, man, those were 2 really big shots tonight that I think are going to get overshadowed in the craziness of this game.
No, those were huge. It's hard to really talk about how huge they were because with so many threes made and such a great offensive performance, 6 points gets lost. But at the time, Indiana needed both of those, and one of them was really well contested, and Hartman just knocked it down. And I think that he's the kind of guy who just – it doesn't matter what's happened before in the game. It doesn't matter, how much he's played, how little he's played, or whatever. He always comes in and gives you the same effort and sort of just kind of has the same heart rate the entire time. You're not seeing it go up and down. You're not seeing a lot of changes. I thought that the problem tonight was he got into foul trouble early, kind of took him out of that first half. Then he got his third foul towards the end of the half, and it might have been at the end of the half or the beginning of the second. I don't remember, but he got 3 fouls pretty early. And I think that just took him out of the game and took him out of the rhythm of the game. Plus, I thought, Hunter Perea had some solid minutes. So did Emmett Holt. So you're getting contributions from guys that where you to the point where you don't need Hartman to play as much. Sort of the opposite of what happened with Maryland. And so we had a deeper bench. You had Jordan Fuchs get in there a little bit. Very briefly, but he was in there. So I think that we didn't need him as much. And also when the game is going well and you have a guy who maybe didn't show the best when he was in there early, you don't want to throw him back in there just to throw him back in there. If things are going well, you want to keep, recycling the lineup guys that are doing well. So I think that held against him. I think that as soon as Maryland started to make that run back, though, Tom Crean put him in. Knew he would be smart with the basketball, which he was, and made 2 big shots. Also had some, was part of some of that ball movement late to move the ball around and keep the offense going. So, not again, like you said, not his best game, but he came up big when he needed to and made 2 really huge shots.
Ryan, you mentioned Emmett Holt and Hunter Mosquera-Perea, and that's a nice segue into looking ahead to Purdue. And Andy, I want to start talking about that game. A few things in life pain me more than having to say complimentary words about Purdue, but they've been playing better. And as soon as that Maryland game ended and I looked at, the supposedly favorable schedule that we had to close out, the Purdue game was the one that scared me the most, even though it's at home, simply because of the matchup and simply because of what they have inside and how they totally dismantled Indiana and West Lafayette. Now, the big difference, hopefully, should be that Hunter Mosquera-Perea is back and can provide a big body against A.J. Hammonds and Haas.
By the way, I'm sorry to jump in on you. There is one reason Jordan Fuchs is on this team. They brought him in when they did because they had the Purdue game coming up, and they need size for that game. I think that, he's probably a solid all-around player and will be a nice addition to the team, but they needed extra size for that game, and you're going to see him get in, I think, if we need him, if somebody gets into foul trouble.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. So, Andy, let's use that as a segue to start talking about this game. What have you seen from Hunter, and even throw Emmett in there if you want to, over these last couple games that leads you to believe that we'll be able to do a better job guarding Purdue down low when they come into Assembly Hall on Thursday?
Well, I think for one thing, just having the threat of Perea in there is going to be somewhat helpful. I thought he had good moments tonight at times, and there were other times when he got so far up the lane on Mo Walker that I have no idea why he was trying to go around, where he was, where there was no help for him down there. So, kind of saw some good from some bad, but I think at least activity level-wise, I thought he's been really active, had some nice, nice cut on a screen roll where Robert Johnson found him, came flying in to get a rebound to keep a possession alive early in the second half, I believe, and that led to a 3. So I thought at least activity level gives them somebody to account for in a way that they didn't have to before. I think, Holt in the kind of role that he'll probably play in a game like that where he might need to come in and, bust his rear for 8 or 10 minutes, I think is a good role for him versus knowing kind of going into the Purdue game the last time that he was going to have to play quite a bit. So I think that's a positive, for those guys heading in. And I think, we talk about Hartman and the fouls kind of took him out of it. I'm not so sure that in the end, having him get a little bit of a night off might not be a bad thing for him from a, just conditioning standpoint. We talked about the knee and coming back and the amount of minutes he played. I think he only played about 15 minutes tonight. So, hopefully he comes in fresh and can, do some things to help spread the floor for those guys as well. And they're certainly going to need him to battle. And I thought he did a really good job in the first game, giving up a lot of size and a lot of things stacked against him. But I thought he played really well in trying to get position, and so getting him, a little bit extra rest, not playing a ton of minutes tonight may pay some dividends there as well. So I think it's, some cautious optimism, but certainly, an area that is going to, frighten you as you look at it, both from an offensive and a defensive perspective, thinking about all the shots that Hammond's blocked, and as you start to look through some of the numbers, the biggest disparity when you start to look at these teams, particularly in Big Ten play, is, Purdue offensively is somehow only third in 2-point shooting. IU 14th in defending 2-point shooting. I think this is updated through tonight. And then Purdue defensively number 1 in 2-point defense, and IU's kind of middle of the pack, 2-point shooting. But we saw, in that game just how much he altered shots, and even though guys kept coming into him, those were in some ways wasted possessions where you feel like you have to go at him enough to maybe get him in foul trouble, but have to do it in a smarter way that might actually draw some fouls instead of going, attacking him the way they did and leading to so many block shots. So, I think those numbers are going to tell a lot. Although, if, IU hits 18 threes again, maybe that doesn't matter. But that's likely unrealistic. Even though, as I tweeted at the end of the game, IU undefeated as a program in program history in games where they made 18 threes. So that will be important. But all kidding aside, I think the same things that decided the first game are going to be key here. Even though IU with Perea and the shooting of late maybe in a little bit better position to overcome those, but those are still huge issues if they allow Purdue to score as many points in the paint as they did in that game.
Dude, screw it. It's Purdue. Let's make 23s.
Exactly. That would be delightful.
Hey, does anybody look? I'm sorry, but looking at Purdue, I know they have a decent record and they're on kind of a roll right now. But does anybody look at that team other than Hammonds? Is there anybody that really scares you on that roster or makes you think like, oh man, I wish we had him? For me, there just isn't. I've watched them play a few times this year. I like Hammonds, and I would enjoy having that size. But other than that, the other 4 guys on the floor at all times, I just there's nobody on that team that really scares me or that I really would love to have been an IU player.
Well, okay, but isn't that
Davis
the
lately has played really well.
Other
than the last couple games haven't been great, but on their stretch when they first started to win, he played really well, like way different than he had at any point in his first.
Right. Yeah, no, he's definitely improved. That's a good point. He's the only other guy I can think of, though, that I would even want to be a rotation player.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here. Haven't IU fans a lot of times looked at pretty good Purdue teams and said, there's not many players on that team I would want playing for me, and yet Purdue's whole thing has always kind of been the whole being greater than the parts, right? And I think that's what we're starting to see from this Boilermaker team. Is that they've got a team who's buying in a little bit to the grit and the defense and all those kind of old school Purdue traits. And no, they may not have the superstar type players, but that's still a team that's more than capable of coming in and beating us if we don't come ready to play. So, anyway, this stops the Purdue portion of the show. Not sure what happened right there.
Yeah, no. Obviously, if a team plays like a team, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. But I guess my point is, if both teams play up to their potential, I just think IU's a better team. I think
I agree with that.
Given all the weapons, that's sort of my point. Is that if you add up, and this isn't how basketball works necessarily, but if you add up, what Indiana can do versus what Purdue can do, I just think Indiana's better. They just can't allow themselves to get screwed in the head by the fact that A.J. Hammonds is standing under the hoop. If they play normally, you can get Hammonds in foul trouble, and then, I think that team is just not very good.
Right, we've just got to recognize he's down there and not just throw shots into his arms like
Absolutely.
we did in West Lafayette.
Absolutely.
All right, so here's something interesting. I'd like to get both your guys' thoughts on this. So the Ken Palm rankings are updated. Indiana started tonight, 50th or 51st, something like that. Minnesota was 41st. So we haven't seen a whole lot of movement after IU games lately, but tonight Indiana shoots up to 41st, and the offensive efficiency is now up to 119.8, which is 4th in the country. And the reason that's important is because we've kind of seen that an efficiency margin in the 12.8 or really the 12.5 to 13 range. I looked at this earlier in the year. That really profiles a team as an NIT team or a team that sneaks into the tournament and loses their first game. In history, teams that have margins like that where it includes a defensive efficiency of higher than 1 point per possession. I should make that distinction. Those teams typically don't do anything in postseason play. But as you start to get into margins of 14 and 15 and 16, those teams are better able to compensate for their defense and do better in the tournament. Well, Indiana now has an efficiency margin of 14, 1.198 on offense, 1.058 on defense. And obviously, this game had a big impact on that because the efficiency margin was about 12.7, 12.8 before this game. So a huge jump. When you beat a team better, ranked higher than you and do it like Indiana did today, you're going to jump up like that. Andy, as you again, we kind of want to take the temperature after each game for the Hoosiers, but as you start to look at this team and another victory over, Minnesota team that I guess is Minnesota a bubble team right now? Where'd you have them in your latest bracketology?
No, I think they're kind of they're probably not completely eliminated, but I wouldn't say they're really in the conversation much at this point, just because of their Big Ten record and they didn't do a ton in the non-conference. So while they didn't play a terrible schedule, they really they've got a handful of good wins. They've beaten Georgia, which probably looks better now than it may have seemed at the time. And they won at Iowa, and then other than that, beat Illinois and Purdue at home. So not a lot of great wins there. So they're like in the, we're coming in today, we're around 70th in the RPI. So not dead, but not really close to being in the conversation. But a decent, at least a top 100 win for IU. So another one of those definitely doesn't hurt. But it was it's kind of one that would look worse as a loss than it does look good as a win, I guess.
That's a good way of putting it. And I mention those stats only, we talk a lot about the advanced stats on the show, and I think they're important, but they're important in context. And I think what, kind of that big jump shows tonight for Indiana is simply that, it projects Indiana into kind of a next level of what you might expect from this team in postseason play, assuming they get there, assuming that the numbers stay like this. So a nice little jump for Indiana there. Because, again, one of two things was going to have to happen for this team. Either the offense is going to have to be so much better to compensate for the defense, or the defense is going to have to improve. Well, right now the defense has continued to get worse, down to 255th in the country, but the offense is 4th overall. And obviously things are going to look a little bit better when you go 18 of 32 from three-point range, but can we really call that a fluke when Indiana's now had many games where they've hit that many threes, and I believe they are now 4th in three-point percentage in the country at 41.7%. So solid there. One other point I want to make, and Ryan, I'll go to you with this, as I just look at Indiana's player stats. There are 3 players listed as having limited roles, and that means that they use between 12 to 16% of Indiana's possessions. That's Colin Hartman, Nick Zeisloft, and Emmett Holt. And those 3 guys actually have 3 of the top 4 O ratings on the team, so it's an overall measure of their offensive efficiency. Colin Hartman, who leads the team at 131.6, Nick Zeisloft at 129.2, and Emmett Holt at 125.2. I point this out for this reason, which is that, when you see guys like that are that efficient but with limited possessions used, they seem to me like guys who really understand their role and who don't try and do too much, and when they are asked to do something, they do it. And that's the sign of a really good team, I think. And that's a sign of a team that can be dangerous in postseason play, that you have guys coming in off the bench, and obviously Hartman has been a starter lately, but we'll see what happens as Hunter Mascara-Pereira rounds back into shape. But that, to me, is, again, just something overlooked about this team that we haven't seen in some of Tom Crean's teams that have really struggled that we're seeing now. The 6th, 7th, 8th guys on this roster really seeming to understand what their role is and fulfilling it on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah, the thing those guys all have in common is that they're smart basketball players, and they get what they can bring, what they can't bring, and what their limits are. And I think that as a guy like Emmett Holt, as he gets older, he'll be able to bring more to the table, especially on the interior. But right now he realizes, every offensive rebound I get, I can't go straight back up and try and score because of positioning or whatever the guys I'm going up against. But he knows when to attack and when to not. And that innate ability that he just seems to have, that basketball sense, is really strong, and it's part of the reason he's so efficient. I think Nick Zeisloft, you've seen games where he doesn't even attempt a three. He just kind of is in there to move the offense along and things like that. Tonight, we obviously needed him to hit a couple buckets and to be more active, and he was. And with Hartman, of course, it's just all about, he's just smart offensively. He never does anything. It doesn't appear that he ever does anything he can't do. So I think that what you're getting with those guys is you have bench players. I still refer to Hartman pretty much as a bench player because he's starting, as we know, because somebody else went down. And tonight he played 14 minutes, which was the same as Pereira and was actually fewer minutes than Stan Robinson. So you're getting guys who are role players, who know their role really well, are smart enough to not try and go outside that role, and who just do what they're brought on to do, which is be smart, be effective, be efficient, and not hurt the team in any way. And I think that you're seeing that, and it's impressive with all three guys. I think that Stan Robinson is starting to inch into that territory as well. You saw him tonight. Just play defense, move the ball, get rebounds, do what you're good at doing. And he had no turnovers tonight, which is the first time in a while Stan hasn't had any turnovers that I can remember. So, again, you're just getting guys who understand their roles, know what they do on this team, and help facilitate the guys who are going to be able to do more, get the ball in positions where they can do damage, and help those guys and help each other sort of elevate their games. And that's how you said it. That's the sign of a good basketball team, is when guys realize that they can help others elevate their game.
Real quick, I want to give a shout out to some of the folks that are driving our chat over on the YouTube page. And you can get to the YouTube page from assemblycall.com/live. But Car Crocker, Melan44, SoCal Hoosier, and of course, user JP Morgan Sucks Balls. All of you doing an amazing job in the chat. We appreciate it. Hey, I don't make up the usernames. I just read them. But whatever. On a night when Indiana wins 90-71, we can all joke and laugh a little bit about a username like JP Morgan Sucks Balls. Hopefully on Thursday night we're all saying that Purdue sucks balls, and let's let that be our segue into giving some official picks. Andy, you want to lead us off and go on record with your thought about IU Purdue Thursday night in Assembly Hall?
Sure. So I will add in this anecdote of Purdue's recent away schedule. So in the Big Ten, Purdue they've won 6 of their last 7 games overall, but their away victories in Big Ten play have come at Penn State in overtime when they needed a missed free throw tipped out for a 3 to force the overtime. They have won at Northwestern, which, as Iowa found out today, perhaps not as easy as it looks. And they have won at Rutgers, but they did lose at Minnesota a couple weekends ago. They turned the ball over a ton against Minnesota, even more than IU, at least on a percentage basis. They've lost at Illinois. I think that was right after IU had played Illinois. Lost at Wisconsin, obviously. It was a closer game than what IU played there. So they're whatever their recent success and their recent successes away from home might look like, I think they're a bit less impressive when you break down what they are and what they've done on the road. So I'm definitely taking IU. I certainly cannot live with myself, nor could either of you live with me if I picked Purdue in this game. So I will not do that, and also because I think Purdue will not win. But
yeah, you wouldn't do it anyway. So
that's true. I would not. I definitely would not do it if I didn't pick Purdue. If I didn't pick Purdue when it was at Purdue, I'm certainly not picking them at IU.
Good. You're a good man, Ryan.
Yeah, Andy.
Make it official.
If you pick Purdue, I think that Jerod and I would team up and vote you off the show. I don't know if that's how things work. I have to check our contracts and everything, but I'm pretty sure that's legal. We go by Survivor rules here at the Assembly Call. I'm going to pick Indiana. Indiana at home on a night game is almost impossible to beat. I think that these guys are rolling right now. I think James Blackman had a comeback game, and I think that the fact that they didn't look ahead to Purdue tonight and really put the hammer down and won by 19. I think that shows they're taking it one game at a time right now, and they're super focused. And I think that you're going to see James Blackman. He had a terrible game at Purdue the first time, and I think you're going to see him bounce back and really light them up. And I think that Yogi too wants to get that win against Purdue because he was the only one doing anything against Purdue the last time. And I think that those guys, they're still smarting from that loss at Purdue because that was an ugly game, maybe the ugliest of the season. Even though, Wisconsin was bad, but Purdue was a team they could beat, and they played like garbage. So I think IU is going to come in focused, and I think they're going to win by a solid margin.
I agree wholeheartedly. And just for comparison's sake, so I was talking about how Indiana's efficiency margin is 14. Purdue's efficiency margin on the season is only 11.8. So they're scoring 1.07, 8 points per possession, giving up 0.96. So their defense is clearly a lot better than Indiana's, but their offense nowhere near. And I think that's a game Indiana's going to come locked in. I don't know if they make 18 threes. I don't know if they make 20 threes. But I think we'll shoot well. I think we'll be – remember, the big issue in that game was Indiana just not recognizing, hey, you can't drive and just throw it in and let them block shots. And it was a huge point of emphasis for Tom Crean after the game, and we've seen Indiana do a much better job of it in games since. And so I think Indiana will be much smarter in that sense. And obviously, Thursday night game, you have to anticipate it'll be an epic Assembly Hall crowd. Add all those things up, and I think this is going to be a game that, Indiana may not win by 19 like they did tonight. And I think certainly Purdue, styles make fights, as they say, and the differences in these two rosters will certainly make it an interesting game. But I think it'll be a game that Indiana wins and wins confidently. But we'll see. It should be a fun one. With that said, let's go around the horn, get some final thoughts, and then we will shut things down. Andy, you go first, so you can go on your merry way and start analyzing some stats, and then Ryan, you next.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, like Ryan said, not looking ahead to that Purdue game, which you have to think after the way this team showed up and played there has been on their minds for a while, and probably an easy kind of look ahead spot where you got kind of this odd Sunday night tip and things like that. But I thought, really came out outside of those first few minutes and the brief lull there late in the second half and played a strong game, really moved the ball well. And those are the kinds of things they're going to have to do against Purdue as well. Get into the paint, force them to react defensively, and instead of tossing it up and getting it swatted back in the same direction it came from, kick it back out and hopefully find guys shooting open threes. And certainly everybody should come into the game with confidence and a game that I think IU will look forward to and play well in. And I hope that when we start to think about different points of this season, there have been some ups and downs and different places. But the more I look back at that Maryland game and how the team really fought and played well in that environment, you hope that you can look back on that as a turning point and really understanding the level of effort that they need to play with from start to finish, and that this is a game where that shows up in a big way. The crowd should be great, and hopefully it turns into a bit of the Maryland game the first time when they visited Bloomington, where you saw great crowd, IU playing really well throughout, and offsetting some of their defensive deficiencies there. So I look forward to a good game on Thursday night. I think good that kind of an extra day there before they get back out and play, and a game that I'm sure they'll be amped up for, and rightfully so. Especially with with a lot on the line from a Big Ten seedings perspective. I know started to see more people make mention of the revised bracket because of the additions of Rutgers and Maryland. So getting into the top 4 earns you a double bye into the I don't know, I guess that's the quarterfinals. So I think that becomes important, and you look, there's still that logjam there of 4 and 5 win teams. So to be able to get this one, give Purdue another loss, and also IU to keep pace and keep in that top 4 contention becomes additional thing to play for here. So hopefully a huge performance to build on from tonight, and we'll have another good one to talk about on Thursday.
And now to the man who would double Tom Crean's contract and buyout if given the chance, Ryan Phillips.
All right, let's not go that far. I did want to mention that we didn't really talk about this tonight, but Indiana tonight surpassed its win total from last year of 17 with 18, and is now 8-5 in the Big Ten. They won 7 Big Ten games last year, and that comes with 5 regular season games and the Big Ten tournament left. So bravo, guys. I think that deserves a little bit of a celebration, but this team clearly isn't done. With 18 wins so far, with Rutgers, Northwestern, and Iowa left on the schedule. I mean, tough games against Purdue and Michigan State, obviously. But, those are 3 very, very winnable games. Anything can happen in the Big Ten, as Iowa found out today in what was a ridiculous game at Northwestern. But, this team is far ahead of where we thought it would be, and we say this every week, but I think it's really important to keep it in perspective. This team is what this team has accomplished and how well it has played, given what it was up against early in the season, what it's been up against with a lack of size, what it's been up against just all year. It seems like this is an underdog team that is fighting really hard, and you have to give them credit for this and how well they've played. And I think we all know they're not done yet. This isn't relax time. This is time to ramp it up. As Andy said, that seeding is important in the Big Ten tournament, and you're looking at the rest of the schedule, and it sets up very favorably for a team that plays extremely well at home and should be able to get both of those road games.
Yep, this is a game, Hoosier fans, that you should feel good about. Indiana comes in, takes care of business, winning by 19, and it's the way they did it. I know Indiana makes 18 three-pointers, and that's going to make everything look better. But the reason why they made those 18 three-pointers is they got good shots. And the reason why they got good shots is because they played unselfish basketball. And they made the extra pass. And they played through the paint. And they hustled and got rebounds. I mean, I really thought at multiple times through the game, I just thought to myself, we just kind of want it more than they do. And I think we did. And I think that is why this game went how it did. To be frank, as this day went along, I started to get a little nervous about this game just because I kind of felt like collectively as a fan base, we'd started to take this final 6-game stretch a little bit for granted simply because, it seemed more favorable than early on, and you look at Ken Palm and it's WWWWW. But each of these games is against a team that if we don't show up can beat us. Minnesota's proven they can beat teams, and Purdue has proven it, and Iowa and Michigan State are capable of beating us, and you never take a road game for granted. And so I think for Indiana to begin this 6-game stretch like this with an emphatic 90-71 victory at home, the kind of win that good Indiana teams get at home in the middle of the Big Ten season, it's got to make you feel good. And so I think this is a good night, obviously, for Indiana fans, but I think you can feel comfortable and confident in how Indiana got this victory. This, good shooting nights, you can't always replicate those and expect that to happen in the future. But a night like tonight where you got the kind of shots you got, this team's a good enough shooting team. They can do this. Not quite 18 of 32 on a nightly basis, but when they play offense like this, they can put up points against anybody. And I think that's what's great to see because this was a pretty good defensive team that came in here. So we'll see what Indiana team shows up on Thursday night. I expect the peak Indiana to show up Thursday night because they've obviously got momentum, coming off a hard-fought win over Michigan, a really good performance at Maryland, and a terrific performance tonight. Plus, you add in the revenge factor and just the fact that it's Purdue and what should be a great atmosphere. And I think Thursday night will be a great night for IU basketball. We will see, and we hope that you will join us after the game because we'll be here for the post-game show. Make sure that you get on the email list. My final reminder for the night, assemblycall.com/subscribe. We will have a nice, fun email for you in the morning that recounts this Indiana victory because I'm sure it's one that you'll want to relive when you wake up. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your Sunday night, and we will talk to you Thursday night after IU Purdue. Take it easy, everybody.